Tonight, Ghana Education Service wades into the comprehensive sexuality education controversy, saying they are surprised at the ongoing debate, but assures under no circumstances will it undermine the legal, cultural values and beliefs of the Ghanaian society.
The Ghana Education Service has not approved any of the LGBT information. There is nothing expected for any of the things that you've had.
Also tonight, the Catholic Bishops' Conference is tonight laying blame at the doorsteps of the Education Ministry. We'll tell you why.
This comprehensive sexual education means bringing in gay and lesbianism into our system, and we have always rejected it, and it is against our church's teaching. So we don't embrace it, and they should not bring it and then teach our children.
And Topstory is always brought to you by Bond Savings and Loans. Your success, our passion. Gasem Cement, the nation builder. Vodafone, the future is exciting ready. The Ghana Education Service is tonight assuring that the guidelines on the comprehensive sexuality education has not been approved. They're going further to assure that under no circumstances will it undermine legal, cultural values and beliefs of the Ghanaian society. And this is coming on the back of a nationwide public backlash at the introduction of the comprehensive sexuality education. Many, including religious leaders and critics of the LGBT movement, including the National Association of Graduate Teachers, have opposed the idea. Whilst the Education Minister, Dr. Matthew Opoku Prempeh, at the launch of the guidelines earlier this year, announced that the implementation of the guideline will begin in September. The Ghana Education Service, in a statement, says the guideline has not been approved. The National Council for Curriculum Assessment, NACA, on the other hand, also says portions of the curriculum is already being implemented in schools. Now, the following News Desk report puts the issues in perspective. Listen.
We met the Minister of Education. The concern was raised, and he tried to allay our fears that it won't happen. The issue is the lack.
If this nation should develop, that sexuality education should be part of the curricula that we would launch this year in September, all the way from kindergarten to senior high school.
Education Minister Matthew Opoku Prempeh speaking at the launch of the Comprehensive Sexuality Education Program in January this year. He justified the introduction of the CSC into the curriculum, that it was important to enhancing the knowledge of Ghanaian students about sexuality.
Ghana has long recognized sexual and reproductive health education as a conduit for addressing issues affecting the youth in this area.
But parents, religious organizations, and civil society groups began to raise concerns after the document was leaked to the media.
So at JHS1, for instance, they will get to talk about fertility regulation. They will also talk about contraceptives and other methods. Then they get to talk about unintended pregnancy and abortion.
And this got many talking. The first to have raised a red flag was the fierce critic of the LGBT movement, lawyer For Amonin, who said some texts and modules in the curriculum resonated with LGBT activism.
It is a strategy. They have a plan. It is always not open for you to see. It is very subliminal, and they come in all sorts of ways. Now, they have noticed that our culture and our religion, we're very strong. So what do we do to counter this? Let's go through education. And education is strong because if you win the mind, then you can win what? The heart.
Some parents have also been condemning the attempts by the government to incorporate this into the curriculum, as they feel they should be the ones teaching their children about the sensitive topics of sex and sexuality.
It's not our culture. For our culture is different. We cannot take white man to compare with the blacks. Because we have our real culture. For you, as a woman, you know a man there. You have to mature before you move.
Executive Secretary of the National Council for Curriculum Assessment, Dr. Prince Ama, says the introduction of these into the curriculum is not new.
They are taught interdisciplinary form, self-identity and knowing about our community, the values and attitudes, personal hygiene and roles and responsibility as a child. We have something like that in our school system currently.
Despite the strong defense mounted by the NACA, the Ghana Pentecostal and Charismatic Council has vowed to kick against the implementation of what it says is a demonic program. Reverend Dr. Paul Frimpong Manson is the president.
We are fighting against sickness, diseases, and whatever. We should teach people the better way to control these things, not how to be gays and lesbians, which is contrary to scriptures. We will kick against it.
So, is there an attempt to subtly introduce LGBT ideas into Ghana's education system? Or the concerns being raised amount to taking things too far? Parents are worried, teachers are worried, religious groups are worried, and the Ghanaian, caring about their values of chastity, is even more worried.
Well, this controversy appears not to be winning anytime soon, as the National Association of Graduate Teachers themselves say they were not consulted, but even if they were consulted, they are opposed to it. And Jokabono is their president.
Western agenda to pursue LGBT issues in Africa is a very intense one. They come in to finance your curriculum, they come in to finance seminars, they come in to finance projects, and they smuggle into conditions of financing some of those issues. For example, if you have a program to orient teachers on a new curriculum, it is financed by a foreign organization. And the foreign organization, in a subtle manner, is able to push some of these conditions that if you are not very vigilant, you will not realize the ultimate agenda that is being pursued. So the gentleman in the studio talking to general guideline. The strategy and intention is to make it open, an open-ended guideline format that will be prone to interpretation and orientation of the person who is going to instruct the children. Again, that ECOWAS document that you just indicated, which I have seen, you will realize that it is not as if ECOWAS engage anybody to come up with an ECOWAS document, but it is some of these donor agencies that are influenced by the strong LGBT lobby group to come up with documents such as this. If he says that he does not want to talk about it, I'll be surprised, because he is very aware that it all dovetails into the single agenda that we are talking about.
But then again, I believe that the argument made is going to be fit in the general context of Ghanaian culture, so that yes, we won't have different things in different schools. You'd rather have every school teaching what is Ghanaian.
We do not need the United Nations to come and give us any information on the general state of our culture.
So that is NAGRA's position on this matter. Clearly opposed to this. The Catholic Bishops' Conference is also opposed to this, and they've served notice if the government attempts to roll this out, they will also oppose it. They are, in fact, accusing the Education Ministry of doing a poor job at communicating this out there, because they say they were consulted on the matter. We know now that this is a part of a resolution that the United Nations adopted, and Ghana is mandated to implement the comprehensive sexuality education within Ghana. We signed up to this. We don't have a choice anymore in terms of rolling this out. The question is whether it remains relevant and contextualized within our cultural norms, etc. The GS has a statement out tonight. I'll tell you what they say about this particular question. But listen to the United Nations, the UNFPA's resident representative here in Ghana, Nii Adjoa-Lepe. He's mounted a strong case for the comprehensive sexuality education, in spite of all the criticism and the backlash from many civil society groups, parents, and the general public. Listen.
Entire documents, the issue of the rolling out of comprehensive sexuality education it's not just going to be done by just imposing it on people, because they are what we call the gatekeepers. And you will need to talk to them. All the people, and I appreciate all the comments that have been made, and the passion and the concerns that have been raised about the issue of, we don't want to teach our children bad things. I can tell you that I'm a father. I also don't want my children to be taught bad things. But I can tell you that the idea is within our society, we're going to reach out to those that we call the gatekeepers, that is the faith-based community, community leaders, parents too. We have there are programs that are going on, which I know which government is doing, is undertaking to engage everybody as appropriate within their context. But then the ultimate goal is to prevent this malice in the society. But there is the issue of, somebody said there is the issue of public mistrust. That is possible. But then I'm sure government is looking at it to fix it. There is an issue of communication, to communicate this in the manner in which it is, to show that there is no underhand motive there. Somebody said that that we have to be vigilant because they might want to smuggle something and push in there. Please tell me, that's even insulting on the sensibilities of the people who are going to be teaching this and the people here locally, because this document was developed locally. It was not developed for us by anybody. So when you say somebody can smuggle in something for you, how can I be an individual? And they say in a how many page document, in a 26-page document, that somebody will smuggle in something there for me to begin to teach. How do you smuggle it in for the teacher to teach? No, I don't agree with that. But then, of course, vigilance, you can't be too vigilant concerning issues that has to do with your children. And I want to say that is fine and that is good. And also to make the point that the UN is not coming to teach anybody anything. The tenets of the UN, the United Nations, is an organization of nations. Whatever the member state says, whatever the government says, that is what the UN is.
Well, the Ghana Education Service has tonight issued a statement on the ensuing controversy. My colleague, Ernest Menu, has a copy of that statement. Fundamentally, they're making the point that this is not approved.
Absolutely, Evans. And they're saying the statement is titled GS Response on Comprehensive Sexuality Education. It says the attention of the management of the Ghana Education Service has been drawn to discussions on various media platforms of allegations that the GES is introducing explicit sexual information to children as young as 4 under the guise of comprehensive sexual education. Now, the GES is surprised at the wide speculations and claims and wishes to clarify as follows. Number one, it says that the new standard-based curriculum being implemented has nothing to do with LGBT issues, masturbation, or explicit display or labeling of intimate body parts. Number two, it says in all the training programs of the curriculum, on the curriculum, from the simulation through master training to the training of the 152,000 kg to primary 6 teachers, there was no mention of any of these issues referred to above. Point 3, the GES says the CSE, which is the Comprehensive Sexual Education, does not seek to throw out the advocacy for sexual abstinence, but rather seeks to reinforce it. The goal of the CSE is to equip school children with age and cultural appropriate information to explore and nurture positive values and attitudes towards sexual and reproductive health, and to develop self-esteem, respect for human rights and gender equality. It further seeks to help students to make informed decisions about their health with emphasis on Ghanaian cultural values and norms. Point 4 says that member states of the United Nations are mandated to roll out CSE in accordance with their cultural norms and values. It is therefore wrong to insist that CSE, as practiced in Europe or North America, has the same structures and content has been rolled out here in Ghana.
So they're expecting the curriculum officials to put in this cultural context.
Absolutely. So that what is happening in America or in Europe will not necessarily be what our teachers will be teaching here in Ghana. Now, point 5 of the statement says that indeed on the 29th of April 2019, the Ghana Education Service wrote to the acting executive secretary of the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment to request the insertion of the phrase, quote, within the acceptable cultural values and norms of the Ghanaian society, unquote. In the third objective, that's page 3 of the CSE guidelines in circulation. Now, the insertion has not been made yet, and therefore GES has not finally approved the CSE guidelines being discussed on various media platforms. Now, the Ghana Education Service wishes to assure the general public that no special sessions have been organized or will ever be organized, and that's very instructive, Evans, by the Ghana Education Service to train students as advocates for sexual rights, let alone LGBT rights, which are culturally, socially, legally, morally and religiously alien to Ghana. The GES is a state agency and will not under any circumstance implement any program which goes contrary to the legal, cultural norms or values of the Ghanaian people. Okay, and it's signed by the head of public relations, Cassandra.
And thank you very much. Let's bring in the spokesperson for the Education Ministry, Vincent Sasefa. Vincent, thank you for your time here on Top Story.
Thank you, Evans. How are you?
I'm doing great. So tell me, the GES says this hasn't been approved. We heard the sector minister say categorically that the CSE will take off in September. This is a new academic year. In fact, we've heard already NACA say that aspects of this is already being implemented with the new academic year in full session. Reconcile that for me.
Let me say a very good evening to your cherished listeners. On the 30th of January 2019, indeed, the Minister of Education made mention of a supposed comprehensive sexuality education. Now, he spoke in the context that the purpose of the comprehensive sexuality education was supposed to improve, number one, sexual and reproductive health of young people and adolescents. Number two, it was supposed to deal with HIV infections, to improve HIV infections. Number three, early and unintended pregnancy, gender-based violence, and 4, child marriage. Evans, one thing that we should know is that policy cannot override law. We live in a sovereign state. The laws of this country frowns on anything that deals with unnatural carnal knowledge. I do not remember the Minister of Education making comments or statements in relation to the comprehensive sexuality education and stating categorically of an initiative or the introduction of LGBT in this country. The Criminal Offences Act of this country states clearly, and that is Section 104, that unnatural carnal knowledge is not supposed to be accepted. I'm paraphrasing. So I do not see why anybody should think that the Ghana Education Service will approve the comprehensive sexuality education that seeks to introduce anything like LGBT. Indeed, with our stakeholder engagement that we have always been having, two things come to play as far as materials are concerned. One, there are in-school materials, and those in-school materials, it is supposed to be used for teaching and learning processes. For example, the curriculum, textbooks, and what have you. Number two, there are also out-of-school materials, and those ones sometimes are built by NGOs who are stakeholders of the education or the Ministry of Education, like the Ghana Education Service. Now, our textbooks or the new curriculum that has been introduced just last September, that the supposed statement that was made by the minister was supposed to address, or if you like, was supposed to initiate or start or commence in the new curriculum, clearly shows that the new curriculum that we have introduced does not have anything in relation to comprehensive sexuality education.
When you say it doesn't have anything relating to comprehensive sexuality education, what do you mean? Because the education ministry, the GS clearly says that comprehensive sexuality education is something that you are mandated to implement under the United Nations.
Coming from, I have not seen the statement.
I'm reading out to you. Point 4. Member states of the United Nations are mandated. Just let me read this to you. Member states of the United Nations are mandated to roll out the CSE in accordance with their cultural norms and values. So that is accepted by the GES that this is going to roll out.
This is the point. I was going to go to the point whereby there is an out-of-school material. That out-of-school material are introduced or developed by NGOs who are stakeholders of the Ghana Education Service. They can propose to say that I am going to have a document or a paper that seeks to address comprehensive sexuality education. Indeed, that NGO can go to Agudoshi and have education on how HIV infections, or if like human rights sexuality is also concerned. They are entitled to do that. But it doesn't mean that that is a document coming from the Ghana Education Service. So I am trying to tell you that the Ghana Education Service and Ministry of Education has no intent or has no intention of approving any document in relation to comprehensive sexuality education that will bring about anything called LGBT.
Well, you say you have no intention. There's a Government of Ghana document, Guidelines for Comprehensive Sexuality Education in Ghana, and you take the objective in there on page 3 is taken from the UNFPA outline objectives, and point C includes nurturing positive attitudes and values, including open-mindedness when it comes to issues of sexuality.
Evans, why are you saying that is a Government of Ghana document?
No, but the document I have in my hand. No, I'm sorry. The document I have in my hand, the back page, the main page says Government of Ghana, Guidelines for Comprehensive Sexuality Education in Ghana.
Anybody can print anything and put their Government of Ghana?
I'm sorry. This is a document that is produced and assented to. In fact, the GES. Just hold on. The GES in its statement acknowledges that this is an official document.
The word in that document is not that of the Ghana Education Service Director. And I'm saying that anybody at all can bring out a guideline and say it's the Government of Ghana. And
I deny. Are you saying that this guideline was not developed by the Ministry of Education, GES, and government?
I reject it. I'm denying that. That is not a document from the Ghana Education Service.
How do you say that when the GES?
But I've already told you that
the GES. Just a second. How do you say that when the GES has a statement out today, admitting the existence of this guideline, and in fact stating that this particular guideline that is out there, they had requested an insertion of a phrase within the acceptance cultural values and norms of the Ghanaian society? This is a document that the GS says is in fact something that they're working with. How do you say you deny the existence of it?
What I know is that before 2016, that is around 2015, there was a stakeholder conference that was held in the Bronx Ahafo region and some 3 other districts in Ashanti region and Western region. Now, there was a conversation on sexuality education, and emanated from that conference that was held in 2015, and that is when something like comprehensive sexuality education really came to being. And in that conference, it emanated that there seemed not to have been enough communication or enough materials in the existing curriculum.
Mr. Safa, have you seen the guidelines I'm referring to? Though, have you seen the
guidelines? But I'm saying that the guidelines is not emanating from the Ghana Education Service.
But how I'm saying that the Ghana Education Service has a statement out tonight saying that it is their document.
And I'm saying that I can't authenticate that statement. I can.
You cannot. But I want you to hold the line.
When there is
hold the line for me because hold on.
I will have to know.
Yes, hold the line for me. Hold the line for me.
I will not be aware of that statement.
We just spoke to Cassandra Chum, the spokesperson for the GS, on this statement. Listen to her.
I must clearly state that the Ghana Education Service has not approved any the LGBT information. There is nothing explicit for any degree of the things that we had. Right from formation to master training to the training of the 152,000 kg to P6 teachers. There was no mention of any of the issues. In fact, if you should ask any teacher right now, they will tell you that they are not aware. It tells you that indeed we have never asked them, we've not given them any material. Even with the teacher resource pack we shared with them, there was nothing like that. And so we have not approved any document.
So this document that's going round, that even the NACA has spoken to, is it just a NACA document that has not yet been assessed and approved by the GES?
What you are referring to, that's the guideline, hasn't been approved. It's something that is being developed to set the it's not even in the curriculum. Ghana Education Service has not approved any document.
Will it approve that document?
The Ghana Education Service will not approve this document until they have gone through it. Until we have gone through it and we are sure that indeed the content reflects what conforms to our society.
And Mr. Safwa, that's Cassandra Chumsu's GES. NACA, which is the state body that develops the curriculum, was asked to do this. She says that is what the guidelines are, is waiting approval. And they're going to study the guidelines as I have it, which I put to you, before approval is made. And you said that document didn't originate from any government quarters.
NACA is supposed to approve a certain document.
NACA is supposed to just simply design the guideline for the GS to approve. GS says, yes, they did design, we are yet to approve. That's the document I was reading to you.
So NACA is supposed to give a document to Ghana Education Service. Is that what you're saying? And approve it, right?
GS to approve. GS, yes, asked for that to happen, which is the waiting approval.
GS has not asked that to happen. I remember a letter that was written on the 29th of April 2019, where a letter emanated from the Office of the Girls Education Unit, Nana AC, indicating to NACA that whatever discussions that they are having, they should ensure that it is in conformity with the traditions and culture of this country. It does not necessarily mean, or it does not also mean that there's a document coming from the Ghana Education Service or the Ministry of Education.
Yeah, NACA is a state agency, is it not? NACA designs curriculum for the schools. In fact, the curriculum that you just rolled out, which has been talked about quite extensively, was developed by NACA, which is a state agency, works with the your ministry and the GES on this, and they have designed this. You say the Ghana Education Service, the GS, never instructed NACA to pull this document together.
I have not said so. I am just telling you that at the level of the Ghana Education Service and the Ministry of Education, we have not approved any document, and we are also saying that we are not going to allow anybody to use the NACA or to use the Ghana Education Service and its agency as a ploy or as a conduit for LGBT to come to this country. That is the point I'm trying to make.
Okay, so categorically, for parents who are concerned and those who are objecting to this, the position of the Education Ministry is that none of this will be approved and implemented in our schools.
I am a colleague. I work with the Ministry of Education. I will never be part of such a discussion, and I will not allow my minister to also give approval to any of these discussions.
Thank you very much, Vincent Asafwa. That he speaks for the Education Ministry. The Parliament's Education Committee, the minority side, the minority MPs there had said that they were going to meet on this particular matter and bring forward a position. We can speak to the ranking member on that committee, Mr. Kpatoy, joins us on the telephone line right now. Mr. Nyotu, thank you for your time here on Top Story. So, what's the decision from your side on this matter?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good evening to your listeners. Let me just make a correction that it's not the minority as a whole that met on the matter, but rather the committee, the minority on the committee of education. Yeah, we have looked at the guidelines as we have it here, and we realize that this is something the Director General of Ghana Education Service even wrote an introduction to, and then from the content, you realize that it is something which is in the process of being implemented, because the introduction says that this comprehensive sexuality education for Ghana to be operated or implemented in two categories, one for school-based and another one for community-based. Our challenge here is that the contents that we discovered in the modules are not the best for our children in this country.
Just a short while ago, the Education Ministry spokesperson says, and in fact, also confirmed by the GES, that none of the concerns you have will even get to the classrooms, because there's no way government and the GES would approve anything close to the suggestions about teaching children about LGBT, accepting it, masturbation, things like that, as I've seen in some of the documents. Does that assurance give you comfort?
But who is the author and the owner of the document? That is one question they must answer.
It depends on the document you're talking about. Is it the guidelines?
Yeah, the guidelines. Yeah, for comprehensive sexuality education in Ghana. Who is the author? Who is the owner of the document? Because if you have government of Ghana on it, and the Director General of the Ghana Education Service giving the introduction to the document, and even thanking the UNFPA for funding the project. So, if it is not coming from the government of Ghana or the Ghana Education Service, we want to know who owns the document.
Okay, and this is something that we'll try and get to the bottom of a bit more. We're trying to also speak to those campaigning against this. Moses Fuamini will join us on the back of the statements that we've heard tonight on Top Story, both from the Ghana Education Service and the Education Ministry, categorically asserting that the concerns simply are unfounded, because it will not be implemented and will not be approved. The guidelines you've seen will not be approved within the Ghanaian context. News 9 starts right now.